Hey there, everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Get ready, because we are about to go on a seriously epic time travel adventure. We're going to explore one of the absolute greatest stories of human invention. We'll find out exactly how we went from literally dragging super heavy loads through the dirt to cruising around comfortably in the fast, modern cars we see buzzing down our streets every single day. So buckle up. We've got a whole lot of fascinating history to cover. Before we make our first jump back in time, I want you to just imagine this massive leap in technology. Picture an ancient wooden wheel, basically just a heavy solid disc chopped right out of a tree trunk. Now, fast forward and picture a modern supercar roaring down the highway. Kind of mind-blowing, right? How on earth did we get from that heavy wooden chunk to a high-speed machine? What were the steps, the crazy inventions, and the brilliant minds that actually made that transformation happen? Well, that is exactly what we're going to figure out. So here's our time travel itinerary for today. We're hitting 5 major historical pit stops: the invention of wheels, carts, and horsepower, the first true automobiles, making cars for everyone, and finally, post-war cars and crises. Let's hit the road.
First stop on our journey, the invention of wheels.
We're jumping way back to 3,500 BC in ancient Mesopotamia. But fun fact, the wheel wasn't actually invented for cars right off the bat. The whole concept actually started around 4500 BC, but as a potter's wheel for making clay pots. It actually took over 1,000 years, until about 3300 BC, for humans to realize, hey, we can use these things to build early vehicles. And then it wasn't even until around 2200 BC that the much better spoked wheel was finally invented. Progress definitely takes time, right? Those very first wheels, they were literally just solid blocks of wood, super heavy, super slow. But the invention of the spoked wheel, wow, that changed everything. By creating a central hub and using wooden spokes instead of a solid disc, engineers got rid of all that extra unnecessary wood. The wheel became way lighter, which meant vehicles could suddenly move so much faster. It was an absolute game changer. Now, the big question is, why do wheels work so wonderfully? Well, it all comes down to physics, specifically defeating our invisible enemy, friction. Think about trying to drag an incredibly heavy backpack across the floor. It's tough, right? That's sliding resistance. But pop that exact same backpack on a trolley with wheels, and just a little push gets it gliding. Wheels working together with axles totally lower the resistance to motion. They reduce the sliding distance on the ground, making incredibly heavy objects super easy to move. All right, let's do a quick recap to lock this into our memory banks. The wheel was invented roughly 5,500 years ago, around 3,500 BC in Mesopotamia. It evolved from clunky, solid wood into those lighter, faster, spoked wheels. And the biggest takeaway? It defeats friction, letting us move heavy things with just a tiny bit of force. Moving right along to our next era, carts and horsepower. Let's jump forward a bit to the 2nd millennium BC. Humans finally had a light bulb moment. Instead of pushing these wheeled vehicles all by themselves, why not let powerful animals do the heavy lifting? Hooking up a 2-wheeled cart to an animal was huge. Carts pulled by oxen, donkeys, or horses basically became the ancient world's delivery trucks, carrying goods across vast distances. And they weren't just for farming, they were legendary in battle. The great Indian epic, the Mahabharata, famously talks about these massive, powerful battle chariots driven by horses. They were absolutely essential. Now, I've got a fun little trivia question for you. Why horses, exactly? How many adult humans do you think it takes to equal the pulling power of just one single horse? Any guesses? Well, the answer is huge. It takes 10 to 12 humans to match the raw power of just one horse. No wonder early inventors decided to use animal muscle. It just makes perfect sense. Time for our second checkpoint. So during this era, humans hooked carts up to super strong animals like oxen and horses to save their own energy. These animal-drawn carts hauled everything from farm crops to ancient soldiers. And we know exactly why. Replacing human muscle with animal power was a no-brainer when one horse equals the strength of 10 to 12 people.
Next up on our time travel tour, the first true automobiles.
Fast forwarding all the way to the 1800s. This was an exciting time because engineers finally figured out how to make vehicles move entirely on their own. Have you ever actually wondered where the word automobile comes from? It's really just a mashup of 2 ancient words. The Greek word autos means self, and the Latin word mobilis means movable. Squished them together, an automobile literally translates to a vehicle that moves itself. Zero animal muscle required. Now, the very first attempts at making self-moving vehicles actually used steam power. Believe it or not, a steam-powered toy was built way back in 1672. Steam engines use what's called external combustion, meaning the heat comes from the outside. But the massive, world-changing leap in technology happened when engineers invented internal combustion. This meant fuel was burning on the inside of the engine itself. And guess what? Internal combustion is the exact same concept that powers most modern gasoline engines today. And that amazing breakthrough brings us right to 1885, when a brilliant German engineer named Karl Benz designed and patented an incredible machine called the Motorwagen. This is widely considered the very first practical, modern gasoline car. And here's a really awesome story. In 1888, his daring wife, Bertha Benz, actually took the very first long road trip in one of these cars. She did it just to prove to the whole world that her husband's crazy invention actually worked on real roads. How cool is that? Time for another quick checkpoint. We learned that the word automobile simply means a self-moving vehicle. We saw how the tech leaped from clunky external steam power to super efficient internal combustion engines. And we met Karl Benz, who made history by inventing the very first practical gasoline car in 1885. Moving on to our fourth stop, making cars for everyone. So as we enter the early 20th century, cars definitely existed, but there was a catch. They were wildly expensive. Only the super rich could even dream of buying one. Early inventions like Karl Benz's car were built entirely by hand, piece by piece, which made them incredibly slow and costly to make. But then came Henry Ford's famous Model T. It wasn't just a different design, it was built in a completely revolutionary way. The ultimate secret to making cars affordable? Mass production. Instead of a team building just one car at a time from start to finish, Henry Ford took a brilliant concept and scaled it up: the moving assembly line. Starting around 1914, cars were built on a fast-moving track using interchangeable parts. This completely slashed the cost to build them. In fact, it was so efficient that an average factory worker could buy a brand new Ford Model T with just 4 months of their salary. Talk about a real game changer. Checkpoint time. Early cars were really awesome, but they were way too expensive for average folks. The invention of the factory assembly line fixed that problem completely by letting companies build cars incredibly fast. And thanks to pioneers like Henry Ford and his Model T, the automobile finally became something everyday people could actually own. And finally, our last stop, post-war cars and crises. Fast forward with me to the years right after World War II. What's super fascinating here is how differently people built cars depending on where they lived. Over in Europe, smaller, really practical cars like the tiny Volkswagen Beetle, which cleverly hid its entire engine in the back, became super popular. But over in the United States, they were building these massive, wide-open highways. To match those epic roads, American automakers built giant, fast, incredibly heavy cars that guzzled a ridiculous amount of gasoline. Fuel was super cheap back then, so people just wanted the biggest, most luxurious rides they could get. But, that giant car party just couldn't last forever. While the 50s and 60s were all about massive cars burning tons of fuel, literally everything changed in 1973 with the first global oil crisis. Out of nowhere, gas became incredibly expensive. Suddenly, regular people couldn't afford to fill up those giant land yachts anymore. This forced the entire world to shift gears overnight and start designing the smaller, economical, fuel-efficient cars that we still see everywhere today. Well, everyone, look how far we've come. We've traveled from dragging heavy wooden discs in ancient Mesopotamia, to mass-producing Model Ts on assembly lines, to navigating intense global oil crises. The whole evolution of the automobile is really just one big story of humans solving problems. So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a question to chew on. With the world now racing toward electric vehicles, and hey, maybe even flying cars, if you were an engineer today, what do you think the next era of the automobile is going to look like? Keep thinking, keep exploring, and keep inventing. See you next time.